So I want to start off by officially recognizing Tatiana and Mike as our new ACES members. I apologize for the noise in the background, so I'll mute myself when I can.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Same here.
Okay, so Karen, should we start with roll call?
Certainly, I can do that. Lisa Skumatz.
So
She's there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe you couldn't hear me from the Can you hear me now?
Now, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Esty Snell.
Here.
Jonathan Koffler.
Here.
Tatiana Duknova.
here,
Mike Foster.
Here.
Steve Sane. Becky Ho.
Here.
Mike Henshin.
Here.
And Jim Zarsky. Okay, thank you.
Karen, would you mind sharing the agenda?
Absolutely.
Cool, thanks.
And I have a question.
Yes.
How do guests speak?
So actually what I'll do is I see Dana's in the attendee section. So I will just promote her to panelist when it gets to the time when she needs to speak.
And you should have an Ann Vandervliet also.
Oh, I do
Or-
see Ann as well. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Great, does anyone have any suggested changes to the agenda?
Yes. The suggested time for the update on the grant, Excel grant thingy is a little too short. I think we're gonna be 15. There you go, 6B. We'll be as fast as we can.
That sounds good. And we don't actually have to make a change for that.
Okay.
That'll be
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay, sounds good. So we're okay with the agenda as is.
Motion to accept the agenda as it is.
Motion seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Okay, so then we can move on to public comment. Are there any comments or any guests?
Nope. So I haven't received any requests to speak, so I think we're good.
Okay. Then should we jump into the Resource Central sprinkler audit status?
Yes, and we do have Park Superintendent Matt Rarick with us tonight. So let me go ahead and pull up, let me switch documents. And I thought I had it here. Oh, here it is. There we go. So Matt, you just let me know when you need me to change pages.
Okay. Yeah, we just received this just after 4 o'clock today, so I forwarded it over as quickly as I could so we could kind of go over some of this stuff. Resource Central, obviously, they've got some of their spiel and talking about what they do and some of the efficiencies and things that they can help make recommendations on. And if we can go down a little bit more, they kind of make some notes, they check some schedules, and they make some recommendations along those lines. I'm not sure if anybody else has had a chance to kind of take a peek at it or not. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We have approximately 75 irrigation clocks in town now, and we just picked 2 in Purple Park. Some of our purple parks, probably our signature park. And those 2 clocks are probably some of the older ones in town as well. So I felt it was a good choice to help get some of this information that we needed. Looks here. Yep, we have 2 clocks. They checked 146 zones. I did not do any extra work ahead of time to skew this at all. So this is, you know, everyday operations that they saw out there. You can see in here, there's tilted heads, there's low heads, which over time things settle out. And I think they mentioned this in some of their dialogue here, where tilted heads and low heads, those happen eventually. The heads with the overspray, I noticed that number was a little high, and some of that we can adjust out. Some of that we just need to reevaluate what exactly is getting covered on some of those areas. So, and then we have, they mentioned the water schedule. And I guess if we can go to the next page there, Karen, please. Yeah, correct heads, overspray, reduce water waste, which I know is a big factor in what we're trying to do here. Correct, yeah. These tilted heads and the low heads, they affect what's called the distribution uniformity, which is a measure of the efficiency of our system. Really common to have 75 to 85% efficiency on rotor systems, even brand new, and then slightly higher on spray systems or spray zones. So you'll see on one of the charts a little lower, some of those uniformities are down in the 50% range even, which majority of them are in the 70, 75 range, which is actually doing pretty well for the age of our system. So if we can go one more, Karen, please. Yeah, this kind of goes over some of the spray zones. What's the difference between sprays and rotors? If you notice, there's an HE as in high efficiency. We have tried some of these nozzles in various parts of town. Sometimes the run time gets to be 3 to 4 times longer than a standard spray. And when you have 85 zones on an irrigation system and you can only run 4 to 5 at a time, the water window gets to be so large that we run outside those recommended windows, water windows of 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. It actually gets much larger into the 18 to 20 hour range. So we've tried some of those, but we're limited because of the size of some of our systems. So that's something we have looked at. And if they come out with something that works better for us, that can shrink our water window and still get that efficiency, we will be looking into those. There's mention of just kind of more common issues there. We can go on to the next page.
Sorry, sweetie.
Here we have the part of the audit that they conducted. You can see they went through and put out what each zone was: spray, rotor. So heads with overspray, that means they're getting unintended off of that zone. Maybe it's overspraying into a bed or something. A few tilted heads there. And then you can kind of scroll down. As we scroll down, you'll see a few others. We had 3 broken heads. You know, that's uncommon. That's not uncommon. Occasionally we do get that stuff. We do conduct our checks as often as we can throughout the town. So we try to fix any of those that we see as soon as we can. So we can keep going down a little bit. Mostly a lot of overspray stuff. So I think we can realize some serious gains or efficiencies with some of that overspray, tightening some of that stuff up, and reevaluating the edges of some of our beds and stuff like that, or even some of the water's edge. We can keep going down a little bit more, Karen. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, we can keep going.
Hey, Matt, I have a quick question.
This is Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yep. So, Matt, since I'm new, how many gallons of water do we use annually for irrigation?
Ooh, annually, that's a tough one. I know midsummer, when we're 95 plus degrees, we can use 2 million gallons in a night. That's
Okay.
not just town. That is also, it was Bell Flatirons. It's not anymore. Or yeah, some of these other HOAs as well tied into our system.
Okay.
So we are the largest user, but we can go through 2 million gallons in a night.
And of that 2 million gallons, how much is that is potable water versus recycled water?
This is all reuse or raw water.
Okay.
So we have maybe 5 zones out of 2,500, 3,000 zones that are on potable systems.
Okay.
Children's Park is 4 zones, and that's down in Original Town. We just didn't have reuse lines there. And that's a little bitty park. And then we have one at the old parks office. The rest is all reuse system.
Okay. And if all of these recommendations were implemented, do you have a rough idea of what kind of percentage reduction you would see? Is that are we talking 5%, 15%?
This is more adjusting and increasing the efficiency. We're looking at a 5%, I would estimate.
Okay.
I know there's been talk of some sod reduction areas, and I've started looking at some areas that would make sense. Most of the areas I would probably concentrate on are areas with a couple trees, like some of the pine tree zones that have a lot of pine trees all nestled together. Where as they've grown, the heads don't cover as well, and the trees kind of block them. So there's some efficiencies we could gain there, or some reductions, and then try to pick a whole irrigation zone and convert it over to drip so that those trees get drip, and then we could go with a mulch or a rock or some sort of bed type thing and reduce it there.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, quick question. And I like that idea a lot, by the way. Sounds like a great idea. You mentioned that you staff will often go around and when you can and check for broken sprinkler heads and whatnot. Is that something Vargas does for us as well when they're out doing their landscape work?
Yes, Vargas, it's in their contract. They have 4 guys on staff that continually go around, and they make it through as many clocks as they can each week, and they conduct repairs as they see them. This year we actually brought on a former Vargas employee in-house, and he's been helping reduce some of our repair invoices, especially on the rotor zones. And this next year, I want to get him into raising and straightening up and increasing the efficiency of the system. So these tilted heads and these low heads, over time, as we get dirt and silt build up in the turf, those heads get lower and lower. So eventually you have to come in, you put a riser on the head so it can reach up above the grass. That's it's expensive to have Vargas kind of conduct some of that. They can and they would, but we would pay that hourly irrigation tech rate. So with our new guy on, I'm thinking we can start realizing some of this efficiency improvements over
Awesome.
time. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that.
Yep. We can go down a little bit more, Karen, please. So we have 2 clocks. We did what we call clock 103 and 104. 103 was that first one, and that is the parking lot and near the volleyball court. And that goes almost all the way down to the north pool. And then clock 104, which is the second clock, that one does the main part of Purple Park by the playground, up along Rock Creek Parkway, and then it goes back behind Gilway as well a little bit. So you can see more heads, overspray. That's some stuff we can tighten up. Along the roadways is difficult. If you adjust the heads so they go right to the edge of the curb and they don't go over the curb at all, over time, that edge does not quite get as much water as it needs. So we would see browning right along our curb line. So that's a difficult one. Obviously, we don't want the heads going 15 feet into the road. That's something we always try to reduce. And I try to call them on that if I ever see that going on. So we try to make it tight, but not, we have to have a little bit of wiggle room. I have a couple ideas on that, but it may not be as aesthetically pleasing to help mitigate some of that over the curb stuff.
Hey, Matt, this is Mike. I have one more question for you. Is our system equipped with ET controllers?
Yes, we are
Okay.
on what's called a Toro Sentinel system. And we actually have 2 weather stations in town, one at each pool. And we can actually switch between one or the other. They read slightly different, but they're really close to each other. And that adjusts the run time every night at 6 p.m. It polls and says, hey, what was the weather today, rainfall, and it recalculates that ET, and then it sends it out. And then we don't have anything that starts before 7 p.m. So it hits the clocks 7 p.m., a couple outlying stuff starts, and then 10 p.m., that's when everything really rocks and rolls.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep. We do water 5 days a week. I know in this recommendation, they had 3 days a week. Those days when we are off, what happens is that ET stacks up. So if you had a 1/4 inch one day, you didn't water, the next time it wants to put down a 1/2 inch. Well, on some of the large clocks, you start running into long windows, especially midsummer. That's at 18, 20 hours a day type stuff. So we do 5 days a week, the mow day, and then another day we just kind of pick and choose to split it up to keep that ET from stacking up. And we can only move so much water in a night. So that's, otherwise we would shrink our windows or run more zones at once. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it looks like there's quite a few heads that need overspray and whatnot. And I think our plan going forward is to go through this here and look at these heads in each of these zones and look for that overspray and see. We're going to have to go on each zone basis. And obviously the low ones and the crooked ones, we'll try to get those, but I think the overspray is one of our biggest concerns for the general public, at least. Yeah, we can go down. And then they have some recommended water days, and depending on the season, obviously days per week. This is where they recommended maybe 3 days a week or 2 days. That really works on smaller homeowner style systems. But just with the size of ours and how much water we can move in a night, we can run 3 zones at once. But there's just not enough hours to run 3 days a week with the ET that comes up. So you can see that. Oh. There we go. You can see they have cycles per day. This threw me off a little bit. So they have the 1 day per week, 2 days per week, and 3 days per week. I'm going to have to talk to them about some of this and what they were recommending here. And then you'll see runtime per cycle in minutes. So if you have 3 cycles in a day, each one of those would be, you'd be running 10 minutes, 48 minutes or something on the rotor zone. I would probably look at the total minutes per week and then kind of reverse it back and break it down to our 5 days a week and look at that. Obviously that changes. And running 10 minutes on a pop-up zone with our clay soils, we get runoff too soon. We're looking at 5-minute maximum run times. So we can kind of keep strolling down, Karen, please. You can see there's some other rotor zones. So here we go. Here's some of our summary of the test results. This shows our average pressure, our minimum and maximum. So a lot of these heads are designed for the average pressure, and they run their most efficient when we are close to those what they've been dialed in, which 50 psi, that's what most of our system is designed for. You can see the precipitation rate, and that is a measure of how many gallons per minute that those heads, or inches per hour, those heads put down. Rotor zones, there's different style rotors, and they are different sized for how far they throw. Smaller ones put down less water, larger ones put down more. And we have some of that data, and that's how it computes the ET data on a daily basis. It takes that precipitation rate and what's called a plant factor, which is real similar to the distribution uniformity. Comes out with a calculation and spits out the minutes. You can see the distribution uniformity here, the average, the minimum, and the max. So according to this chart right here, we're actually right around the range that we should expect for a rotor system. Maybe the spray system looks a little low efficiency wise, but actually this is better than I thought it would be for the age of our system. And then they show root depth for the depth of those roots. The deeper they are, the more infrequently you can water. The town of Superior previous contractor used to kind of irrigate by flood, and it would look really green, but middle of the day your feet would be soaking wet. And it's taken me over 10 years of trying to slowly reduce how much we put down and change our watering to get this deeper root depth so that the grass is more sustainable. So we can go down a little bit more, please. Here it's so they did not check every zone for this efficiency. That would be way too time consuming. So they picked a good smattering of them and probably did maybe 50% of the heads out there, or 50% of the zones out there. And you can see right in the middle, the DU, which is distribution uniformity. Yep. Most of those are pretty good. There's a few low ones in there, and we will pay particular attention, and we'll take a look at this here and match it up with their tilted heads and overspray, and see if we can glean any information and try to tighten up some of those efficiencies. Some of them are, I see an 84 in there. That's really good. So, and then we have approximate run time per watering day. I think those are suggested possibly. And then we have precipitation rate in inches per hour that we can reevaluate with what we have in our computer and possibly tighten up some of that as well. And then the head pressures, some of those seem a little bit low. It depends on how many zones or how many heads are on a zone. That can affect the head pressure as well. We can go down some more, please. Yep, this is another clock, and it also shows the clay soils. That's really what we have out here, and it's a tricky beast to water. It doesn't take up water, and then all of a sudden it's too wet. So it's been an interesting experience out in Superior, trying to dial our system in. So you can see, yeah, more of those. It mentions the broken heads, and kind of goes over some of those, the tilted and low ones, you know, over time they settle and tilt, and it decreases our efficiency. And then it goes on. I'm assuming everybody will kind of glean through this report with a little bit more time. And if you have more questions, please feel free to ask. Head spacing, older designs, they may not have tightened them up as much. Every designer kind of has their own outlook on how they like to space their heads and the type of heads they use. So, yep. I did see on just up a little bit and mentioned mixed zones. Sometimes we get, over time, you'll get two different rotors out there, like an I-40 or an I-25. While they put out close to the amount of water, they really should all be the same. They should be either one or the other. That way that efficiency is increased. So there was a couple notes where there's a few mixed zones, so we'll definitely look into those. And here they mentioned the watering schedule utilizing ET. They based theirs on a Kentucky bluegrass. Majority of what we have out here is a tall fescue blend, so it should use slightly less water. It can be drought tolerant, so it should use slightly less water per year. And then they mentioned cycle soak here. All of our schedules, we have at least one repeat. So it takes that ET that it recommends for the night and it splits it in half. So it goes through the cycle once, and then it'll come back and go through the cycle again. So that's our way to get the cycle and soak.
Hey, Matt, this is Mike.
Yep.
If we primarily have tall fescue, why isn't there analysis based on that? Why is it based on Kentucky bluegrass?
Yeah, most commonly, most homeowner systems, it's been Kentucky bluegrass. I don't know if the technicians made note of the tall fescue out here. That didn't come up in the questions, and I wasn't sure if that would be on the report or not. So
if they were to rerun this analysis based on the tall fescue, how substantially do you think these values would change?
Well, I think the efficiencies are what the efficiencies are. It comes down to their where they mentioned the 27 inches per year. We might be talking 25 inches per year for the tall fescue. I have to look it up. So that would affect maybe our minutes per week a little bit, and some of our overall large scale budgeting for the water. But yeah, we're not too far off.
Just want to make sure you're getting the credit that's due.
Yeah. We try hard, I know that. And that's kind of a quick glance over that. You can, obviously, if you want to delve in and look at a little tighter, there's some efficiencies we can definitely make. And if we start having keep our eye on our end goal, I think we can probably see some reductions townwide on all of our systems.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. That was really great to see all that information. Is there any way of tracking some of the potential savings that result from making all the changes that you guys are going to be working on in the coming months?
It's interesting because of the ET, it adjusts daily. So we may be able to look and we'd have to look at how we could track some of that, whether it's a daily ET value and we don't necessarily want to do an audit every week or something. That would be cost prohibitive, but we might be able to do like a monthly and compare to the ET and then compare to past years possibly. So it'd be a little bit of computation, but I think that might be something we could look into.
Okay. Yeah, if there's some way of that's, not too time intensive to get sort of a rough estimate of potential savings, I think that'd be really awesome to share out with the town. I know you guys are doing a lot of great work, and oftentimes a lot of the residents don't understand that. So it'd be really cool to say, like, look how much water we're saving now as a result of this.
Yeah.
So if that's something that's not too hard, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I know we can show cost savings for our employee that's in-house now doing some of these. So we're saving money on that, but that's not the goal for the efficiency. So, but we can have, with our person on board, we can get an eye towards focusing on increasing efficiency. So I think having that person in-house is going to be a benefit for us.
Cool, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks again. Are there any final questions anyone has or comments? Okay. Well, thanks again. And I guess we can jump into the next item, which is a quick update on the July 13th board meeting, which Mike was in attendance at. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick update of kind of how that meeting went and how many takeaways or thoughts you had.
Oh gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago. Okay. Yeah, I did speak at that board meeting. My role at the board meeting was to inform the board and share more specifics about recommendations that we had made on this committee. In particular, focused on the landscaping contract, which is great that Matt's here. But as you may recall, the town's landscaping contract is up for renewal, or rather the current contract term is ending and the town will issue an RFP for a new contract, which will be available for competitive bidding. We had made a couple of recommendations. First, asking the respondents to that RFP to provide options for transitioning to electric, from gasoline or diesel equipment to electric equipment as much as possible. We made that recommendation open-ended so that, with the right language in the RFP, that would enable respondents to give us a variety of responses and just tell us what they can do and what it would cost. And then we had a second recommendation come out of this committee, focused on the possibility of reducing the actively maintained turf areas in the town and transitioning some of those, having the flexibility at least to transition some of those areas to native landscaping or options that would require less active maintenance, less water use. And so I just spoke to those two recommendations. My sense is the board members were quite supportive. At this point, all we were asking is to include some language in an RFP, so the commitment level is quite low for this recommendation. And I would say it was warmly received. There were a few clarification questions about what we might expect with the availability of these technologies or with responses, to which I think the answer is we're not sure, but the best way to find out is to ask and see what we get. I would anticipate that later in the year there will be a second opportunity. Presuming this does get asked, and then respondents do sort of tell us what the options are, that we will want and need to review the options later in the year, which would potentially inform a subsequent recommendation. And especially we'll want to consider, like, if there is an additional cost to transitioning to electric equipment, what could that look like? So hope that comes up again soon. yeah, that's basically the update.
Cool, thanks, Mike. And thanks again for presenting to the board. Anyone have any questions before we jump on to the next item? Okay.
Well, I actually, since Matt's here, Matt, if you're still listening, is there anything else that you would ask of this committee? I mean, we sort of made a recommendation to the board, but I understand it's kind of in your role to manage that RFP. Is there any feedback you have for us? Was the recommendation clear? Is there anything else we need to be thinking about?
No, I think the recommendation is pretty clear, to convert to the or to look into the electric possibility. I'm not sure the technology is necessarily there quite yet, but we are asking for their plan and what their thoughts are on it. There might be a few other things like possibly propane that might be a cheaper entry in to reduction in emissions and whatnot. So I think we're pretty clear on that. We're definitely gonna bend their ear and push the envelope with them and definitely get them thinking about this. So.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thanks so much. So then I just wanted to share a quick update on the town board meeting from Monday, which I attended. And in that board meeting, we talked about the waste contracts. And so we shared a lot of feedback that we've talked about extensively as a group, which is around looking at different options with regards to bin size, compost options, and then a frequency of recycling. There are some good questions that came up around coordinating the town's waste services with Rock Creek's. And we discussed how that's not really, unfortunately, an option for at least a couple of years until the end of the contracts are in the same year. And we also very briefly discussed kind of pushing for electric or low carbon fleets as well, where possible, in the RFP. So I think the board was fairly receptive, and things are going to move forward. I think there wasn't a huge clarity of understanding around the benefits of different bin sizes. So I tried to spend some time on that, but I think it was also seen in part as just sort of a complicating factor in the RFP. So hopefully we were able to get some bids with a variety of options, but that's sort of what the general reception was with the town board. And Ken, feel free to jump in too if there's anything I missed, but that's my general takeaway.
I think that was a fair description of the conversation, Ezzy. The only other thing that I wanted to point out, and I don't know, Ezzy, if you were on yet, or if Jim was on yet, but we also received a presentation earlier in the meeting on a 2020 energy baseline audit that was done, and had a conversation related to our sustainability goals going forward. No decisions were made, but I would say that overall the comments and questions were fairly positive and pointed towards a continued direction towards increasing our sustainability throughout town. And I think where we'll really start to see improvements is come the budget season, when a sustainability coordinator is added as an FTE for the town, which you guys already made your recommendation towards. Assuming that does get funded, I think that's when we'll start to see more movement towards moving to a more self-sustaining energy footprint.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the discussion. I know we've got a couple of big things on here. Karen, would it be okay to jump into the Excel Partners Energy Program discussion first, since we've got a bunch of people on the line to talk more about that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Well then, Lisa, I'll turn it over to you and your team.
Thanks. And Karen, do you have the presentation?
I do. So first, let me,
Bring my folks on.
yes. And so I'm going to switch Dana and Anne. So they should be, there's Dana and Anne, and then let me pull up. This, whoops. Can everyone see that?
I can't see a
the
slide.
agenda.
I still see the
Oh.
agenda.
Okay, so. Now can you see it?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for the change in the agenda. We're going to be giving an update on the 2019-20 Superior Neighborhood Interventions and the Excel Energy Plan update. The presentation is by me, by Dana D'Souza, and by Anne Vandervliet from my staff. Thanks. Next slide. So on the next slide, thank you. I just wanted to give a little bit of background for the folks who weren't around in 2019 when this got started. Excel approached us, gave a little presentation about their Partners in Energy program, where they partner with communities to try to achieve energy savings. They've partnered with other communities in the state, and linked us to what the kinds of goals and strategies they undertook. So we applied for that program. We got accepted. We being me misunderstood the content or the way that the project worked. I thought that it was sort of like a grant we'd done for Boulder County before, where it was a grant and they were basically helping fund some efforts we might want to take in figuring out how to get to the energy plan. Turns out that wasn't the case. They were talking about tailored this and tailored that. So I thought they were going to be funding sort of tailored outreach strategies. It turns out we found out after about 2 meetings that, that wasn't what they meant at all. They really meant how could we help them get more participants in their energy conservation programs, which was quite different. But by then we were sort of already into the planning and so on for this other strategy. So we're going to give you the update on that program first, which is trying to figure out, can we move people toward greater sustainability activities with fairly simple programs here in Superior. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Because they weren't providing any funding, we funded that by my company. So thank you for that. Thanks for the acknowledgement of that by the town. Thank you. What we're trying to do, and what the project was trying to do by the energy plan, was to set an energy goal, and we needed to figure out what was reasonable, achievable, tailored for our community. So we did ask some questions about what goals might be possible. We also worked to develop some tailored strategies, and that's kind of where we went astray, and I went off on this tangent. And then when they get to the energy goal and energy plan, there'll be follow through and measurement and so on the various strategies that they recommend. So next slide, into the efforts that we undertook. So we had to first, we decided 3 neighborhoods that we found 3 neighborhoods that were comparable. Dana did a lot of work at the census block group level and that sort of thing to figure out where were 3 neighborhoods that were really similar that we could do different interventions on. So we ended up with a control neighborhood where we did nothing, a test neighborhood where we were going to do minimal stuff, and a minimal social marketing without touching, basically, and then a more intense neighborhood. Well, given COVID, we ended up with a no touch pretty much everywhere, and we ended up with more minor differences between those 2 treatment neighborhoods. We did pre-survey focus groups, message development, postcards for recycling, water, and energy flyer, and periodic meetings with Excel. Measurement was a real big focus of what we were trying to do. So we ended up with a pre to post survey. We ended up with Dana going out every other week and checking on how many trash and recycling carts were sent out. We did recycling, water, and energy quizzes or commitments. We did oops tags in one neighborhood to figure out who was doing a good job or not a good job on recycling. weights for recycling weight in 3 neighborhoods and inspecting contamination in 3 neighborhoods. And then I should mention the post survey with kit as a pre-prize, only because it made my garage get much cleaned out. So originally we were going to use these kits as a talking thing, where we go to the neighborhoods and say, oh, the heavy treatment neighborhood, and say, oh, here we're handing out these kits and let's talk about, recycling, let's talk about energy. Well, once COVID hit, that wasn't going to work. And I had 2 pallets of energy kits in my garage. So Dana and Ann had the great idea of, we have trouble getting people to fill out post surveys. Let's give them a recycling kit or this energy kit up front so they feel compelled to answer the survey. And it really helped our response rate for that final survey, and it got my garage cleaned out. So 2 parts. We had a pre-post water data collection and also energy from data from Excel. Next slide. So I'm going to talk really fast, or not faster speed, but short, about 2 of the easy things, the water impacts and the energy impacts. And then other folks are going to talk about a drill down on the recycling. First of all, for the water impacts, I want to thank you, Town of Superior, for the data. I believe we asked for at least 68 people in each neighborhood picked randomly so that we could figure out the impacts on water. And I think they had to look them up by hand. They were really great about it. The pre-period versus the post-period are demonstrated on the slide, but just so you know what the interventions were, we provided a postcard with tips on reduced water use. We provided the same for both treatment neighborhoods. Nobody in the control neighborhood got anything. We talked about reducing the temperature for the clothes washing, doing it less frequently, fuller loads, shorter showers, low flow shower heads, avoiding rinsing the dishes that were headed for the dishwasher, and xeriscaping your front yard. Once they got the postcard, they were also directed to a quiz on the web, and if they did well on the quiz, they could get an energy kit for free. This was before we handed out the post energy kits to a boatload of people. The pre-post with control group analysis shows us that there was probably about a 2% reduction in the water use in the treatment neighborhoods compared to the control neighborhoods after a simple postcard. So that's pretty promising, and postcards are not very expensive. Next slide. On the energy side, we got data from Excel. We unfortunately have data through June, and since they did not get their flyers mailed out until the very last day of March or May or the beginning of June, we may want July data too, but we only have June. We compared it January to June and then June to June. And there's something goofy going on in the north neighborhood between June to June, but it looks like perhaps about 1% savings, energy savings happened from the flyer that was sent out. Now I should note one other thing for both this and the water and the energy stuff, or in the recycling stuff. These are neighborhood measures. We're measuring what happened in the entire neighborhood. A bunch of people made no changes. So this is an effect within those neighborhoods. So this is an effect that was experienced across the neighborhood, even though only a percentage of the people in those neighborhoods paid attention to the postcards and did anything out of the postcards. So the impact for people who actually read it and did something are bigger. The neighborhood-wide effect, counting in the people who didn't do anything, make any changes, is still 1% from a flyer. So I think that's promising. We're still expecting more data from Excel so we can get statistical confidence as well. The tips that we gave were behavioral tips, do-it-yourself tips, and Excel programs that were available. And those were all put on a flyer. We asked people to make a commitment, directed them to a web. They got a prize if they made 5 commitments. Next slide. We're going to drill down on the recycling results. Next slide. Dana.
Great, thanks. So this is taking a look at, over time, the set out surveys, and we were looking at the number of trash cans versus the number of recycling cans that people set out. So if they set out 1 recycling can and 1 trash can, that would be a 1. If you notice the scale on the left, it starts from about 70% up. And what we notice that it started pretty high. So people were fairly regularly setting out their recycling bins. If you notice that first line, that's when the recycling, the first vertical line, that's when our recycling postcard first went out. And there seems to be, the yellow line is the group of people who got the recycling postcard as well as the OOPS tag. The blue line is the people who only got the postcard, and then the green line is the control. And if you see right after we sent out the postcard, there's a little bump in everyone. That center bump around week 7, I think that's related to maybe COVID. That's right after we had the stay-at-home order. And then if you look towards the very right-hand side, we had the first OOPS tag. This only affected the yellow group, the yellow line. And that was when they first got information, that feedback through the OOPS tag. And then we also, the following week, recorded their set out as well and gave them another OOPS tag with feedback on how they were doing with recycling. And so, I mean, you can see that they're all fairly close in the different neighborhoods. Next slide. So on this one, this was a result. This is showing results of the survey. This is the pre-survey that we did when we initially asked people to respond without any education or outreach given to them. And then it also shows the post, which are the darker colors. And that's the very end, starting in July. And what we saw is this is testing people's knowledge of what can go into the recycling bin, curbside recycling bin. And so again, it's the same thing. The yellow is the people who had not only the postcard education, but also the feedback directly. The blue is just the postcard, and the green is the control and no outreach. And I think you can see the bolded ones showing that certain things, the full treatment group, the yellow group, definitely improved in their knowledge. And that's what you can see with the clamshells, certainly the single-use coffee cups, the frozen food containers, and then also the behavior as far as recycling with plastic lids on. And then also that clean build aluminum was in. Some of the things that we highlighted in the postcard that went out were that plastic bags, frozen food boxes, and Starbucks coffee cups, as well as shredded paper, could not go in. And I think you can see that both the yellow and the blue group who got that postcard did improve in those areas. I think also that it shows that there's still quite a few people, if you look in the blue and in the green area, if you look at recycling behavior as far as leaving the lids on, it's still only 50% of the respondents answered that correctly. And also in the control group, still in the 50s as far as how many people think that single-use coffee cups can go into the recycling. Lisa, was there anything else on that one that you wanted to say? So next slide, please. And I think that's Anne.
So hello, everyone. So these are some of the results from the actual OOPS tags that we left. Now, the biggest factor with the OOPS tags was the overall contamination, or the overall number of bins, or the percent of bins that ended up that were clean in the neighborhoods. So the individual materials overall did not improve very much, or at least most of them didn't. So our biggest factor with the OOPS tags was the overall percent of clean bins in the neighborhood. This first graph shows that the OOPS tags area improved by over 20 percentage points, while the postcard area only improved by about 5%, and the control group actually got worse. They had more contamination in their bins. One of the few materials that did improve from the OOPS tags were plastic bags. And you can see that there was over a 20% or 23% improvement in the reduction of plastic bags versus the other two areas that had a much lower improvement. Next slide. So we did a total of 2 rounds of OOPS tags. As you can see, the first OOPS tag is the most important OOPS tag. We had about a 42% increase in the percent of clean bins after that first OOPS tag. The second OOPS tag only gave us an additional 8% off of that original 42%. So when you're looking at OOPS tags, the most important thing is to do is just to do one, or to wait a longer period of time between the first and the second OOPS tag. Next slide. Lisa, what exactly did you want to talk about here? Just
I think this just amplifies the one before. The only thing I would say is the high remaining contamination. Which are the highest remaining contaminations, which may not be on the slide? Did you happen to see which things were still bad?
yeah, so the highest ones are on the next slide.
Okay.
So this is just kind of an overall look at the most common incorrect items that we found in recycle bins. This first part, the very top part, are the kind of non-problem materials. So this was, these materials were found in less than 10% of the bins throughout our entire study. So again, coffee cups and like greasy pizza boxes, while they're big no-nos, they weren't a huge contaminant. The second area are kind of our problem items that were fixed by our outreach. So these are items that that started out at more than 10% contamination, and then after our outreach reduced down to less than 10% contamination. From our postcards, we figured that trash and bagged recycling was reduced from those postcards. However, overall contamination, those Amazon bubble wrap mailers and plastic bags required the OOPS tags to reduce their contamination. And this last area are the items that remained at more than 10% contamination throughout our entire study. So the big ones are like frozen food boxes and non-recyclable papers such as receipts and paper towels. What's kind of interesting is that from the survey results, there was a large improvement in the number of people who knew they weren't supposed to put frozen food boxes in the recycling, but that didn't actually translate into what they were actually putting in their recycling bin. All right, next slide.
Okay, so the next results, thanks, are related to the helping inform the sustainability initiatives that Superior's ACES committee may want to take. Dana?
Thanks. So these are, again, through the survey, and these are questions that we asked of everyone, and we asked them how they felt about certain programs or their usage of particular programs. On the recycling, you see that as the lighter blue up on top. For pay-as-you-throw, there were more than over 60% of the people said they were either in favor of it or they would be interested in seeing more information about a pay-as-you-throw type program. We also asked questions how important different programs and different behaviors were to people. Recycling received a very high marks at 86% said they were extremely or very, but they would like to see more materials accepted curbside. There was also a fairly strong response on people that would be interested in more curbside collection, but there were quite a few people that were unaware that we do currently have the possibility to purchase through a hauler curbside collection. And then I think looking at the very bottom of the gray areas, when we ask people again about importance, saving energy in their home listed as one of the top ones with 84%. But when you get down to the bottom with where the red arrow is with our energy goals, we asked people a pretty broad range from 1% reduction of Superior's energy goals up to I think something like 30%. And these were the top 3 responses, somewhere between 3 to 5, 6 to 10, or 11 to 20% reduction received pretty good support, which was surprising to us because that's a pretty significant amount of reduction. And this, I compared both pre and post, and both pre and post, it was the same, that those were the top percentages for desired reduction. Next slide.
Thanks. Can we go back to the one just one more time, one moment? So one of the things that you should notice also with the presentation that was earlier, water conservation is also really important to folks, and I did want to mention that. The energy goals are called out because we're supposed to set energy goals as part of this Excel program. So the fact that they're somewhere in the range of 3 to 20%, but with a third, roughly a third in each of those categories, seems to mean somewhere around 6% isn't something that they would balk at. So that's a kind of an interesting finding. Next slide. As you may know, Excel went ahead and put together some possible strategies that we could take as part of their energy planning sessions. They provided us something like 8 or 10, I don't know how many pages, maybe 3 pages for each of these strategies, of strategies that they thought might fit us, given the information they got from our pre-survey, from some ongoing stuff, and from the priorities expressed by the committee early on. Residential outreach strategy, a business outreach strategy, an energy efficient new development, so building over in across the street type strategy, and electric vehicle infrastructure and fleet. They were suggesting, social marketing, emails, cold calls for the outreach efforts, which are largely a few self-directed or do-it-yourself, but mostly energy efficiency programs that, telling people more about the energy efficiency programs that already exist at Excel. The energy efficient new development is about Energy Star new homes and energy design assistance. So again, some of their programs, they think that the best way to get those to be accomplished are through the planning department and building department in town, mailers, outreach to developers, the Chamber of Commerce, and the next door method. And finally, the electric vehicle infrastructure and fleet, they thought the 2 goals that we might set are 2 new chargers put in town by 2021 and increasing the electric vehicles in the town fleet by 2021. They thought that the next steps we would need for that are a study for what locations the chargers might be, and discussions with the town fleet manager, and also funding, getting that into the town budget. The strategies that they had that took up a fair number of pages need work, need tailoring, need the committee to focus and decide which ones they like and don't like and what next steps need to happen. But it includes a pre and post metrics plan, who is responsible for what activities, and then other details in these draft 3-page summaries per strategy from Excel. Next slide. And next slide. So the next steps for ACES are to, 1, decide if you want to make an energy plan with Excel or a sustainability plan with Excel, or partly with Excel for energy and partly with sustainability. And Excel has a whole process for how they like to partner for that kind of work. And that's, looking at what goals other places have set, strategy refinement, and carrying that through into the action mode. They'll need a point person for that. And one of the qualifications, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, is that you need to be able to sit through meetings with a lot of process people. So that's not my forte, and I'm just going to tell you, whoever wants to do that should be able to do that. Goal setting, I would like to talk about a goal setting now if I can. As you saw, the one postcard that we sent out, or the one flyer we sent out about energy, got us about a 1% reduction in energy. They want an energy goal as sort of the first step that they can then tailor, that you all can work to tailor the incentives toward. And so, like Dana said, on the 3 to 6 to even as much as 20% goal, you had like 30% of the people on pretty much every one of those. None of the other communities set a goal that was quite as high as even 6 or 7% when they gave us a look at other community goals that have been set. So even 6 would be quite a stretch compared to other communities. 1% we got possibly through a postcard, but the next stuff that we'll be getting from Excel will include participation uptake in their programs, thanks to that flyer and other things like that. A goal of 1% seems to me a little low. A goal of, the higher end of the 6 to 10% one seems pretty high. I think we should, maybe think about goals somewhere in the 4 to 7% range. And I'd love to hear what people have to say about that. The only thing we measured with that impact was residential. So, and it was an immediate residential impact the very next month, not allowing people to sort of invest in new thermostats or, all the rest of that jazz. So I'd love to have some discussion on that by the audience for a second. Initial feedback? Okay. Well,
Could you
I guess
expand on-
think about it. Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Mike.
yeah, just this, I see you say decide if we want energy plan or sustainability plan. Is do we have a sense of what those look like? Like, we also have in the agenda today to talk about sustainability goals for the town. Is the prospect here that we would work together with Excel to create the sustainability plan? And how is that different from what an energy plan would look like?
Sure. So the Excel is really only interested in an energy goal and an energy plan. And their energy plan, the energy plans that I looked at in the past are pretty much directed at improving the town's knowledge and advertisement or direction of people toward Excel's energy programs. I think if you want to talk about things beyond that, it's something that you may have to take on kind of the side, where Excel helps with the energy part of it, but the other parts, the committee does kind of more on its own and then marries them up at the end of the process. So that's my suggestion. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll just finish up and then you can talk some more if you want, or we need to get to the other folks, and I get that. So again, the report that we'll send you that will include more results about the recycling problem materials and that sort of stuff, so you can set up what messaging you want around recycling as one of the things that you want to affect, and also look at getting more community-wide with it. We need to include expanded commercial strategies, and we need to take these results and put them into the scorecard as well. And the next slide. And there's one other to-do that you need to do, and that is, oh no, replace a member, because my house is selling. So after next month, I'm going to be a resident of Silverthorne and not Superior. So I'm going to be moving, and I'm really sorry to leave, but I've been a member off and it's about time. But before I go, and before next month is over or whatever, I will try to give you my feedback on what I think some of these goals ought to be, both energy, recycling, and so on, just so that you have my input on those sorts of things. Thank you.
Lisa, I just want to thank you for all your service to the town over the years. So I know you've made a lot of really big contributions, so I want to say thanks.
And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and it was the thing that got me out of the house, was joining this committee, so thank you very much. It got me energized and got me onto the town board, and interested in the town board, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much. They always say, if you want to see change, get yourself elected. You can't. So that's what. So you guys all ought to think about it. So okay, I'll let you go on to the next budget agenda item. But thank you for the time. Thank you for the attention. Thank you, Dana and Ann, for all of your hard work on these results, and appreciate it.
Well,
Yes,
I'll
thank you.
probably be on next month, but probably not after that.
Okay. And real quick before we move on to the next discussion item, is there anyone who is rearing up the chance to be the next Partners Energy sort of point person on ACES? And if not, we can continue the discussion later or through email too, but I just figured I'd open up the discussion real quick.
And I'll be sending they wanted me to resend their strategies, so I'll make sure and get that to Karen so she can resend those strategy drafts.
Okay, well, I'll keep bugging everyone via email, but thanks again, Lisa and Dana and Ann. All right, so I was hoping to end by 7. Karen, what's the protocol? Do we have to go through all of the agenda items, or can we postpone one for another time?
Yep, you're more than welcome to push things out to the next month's meeting. There has to be a first and a recommendation, a first and a second.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, if everyone's okay with it, I would suggest moving the Durroot proposal to next month's agenda, especially since it'll be helpful to have Trustee Lish on the call as well to discuss that.
This is
So-
I'll
Mike
make that
Fox.
motion. I'll second it.
Yeah. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes. All right.
Sorry,
think
I
passing
have that video, but I say yes.
Okay, thanks. All right. Well, with that, then we can move on to the Green Business Recognition Program. This is another program that Caitlin was taking the lead on, for those of you who know her. And she unfortunately is no longer with ACES. So it's sort of a program without a lead point person. And so I want to discuss this a little bit and see if someone else might be willing to take the lead on this. This is essentially a program working with the PACE program in Boulder County, focused primarily on energy and sustainability. And they offer a lot of support to local businesses and for businesses that take them up on their advice and additional resources and actually make improvements to their energy efficiency and sustainability. There's a recognition program that's been set up so we can recognize their efforts. So my understanding is it's not necessarily a hugely heavy lift. A lot of the work has been done to set it up. It's more just making sure that we're on track to recognize the businesses and coordinating with PACE occasionally to make sure everything's on track. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions that anyone has about that particular program? I know that's a very brief summary of it.
What is there's a busier time of year for that, right?
Yeah, and so obviously with COVID, things are a little bit different, as with everything.
Right. Usually they
so-
give the awards are given. I forgot what time of year. And
Yeah, I think in the past we've done the program over the kind of late summer through fall, and then the recognition awards are given sort of like in late spring, early summer. Is that right, Karen?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I just want to raise this. I'll ping everyone via email and I'll start bugging people to see if we can find some point people for these, but I just want to bring it up as a discussion item. So please keep that in mind and let me know if that seems like it might be something that might be of interest for either of those two programs. Any additional questions on that item? Okay. So finally, I want to talk about the next steps with the sustainability scorecard and the town sustainability goals, which ties into the discussion we're just having. So I guess, Mike, if you want to take it from here and I can,
Yes.
your discussion.
All right. And we're going to try to meet your goal, Andy. Karen, would you be willing to stop sharing your screen and then I'll share mine? And just put some-
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just getting my screen ready here.
I'll try to clarify which mic from now on, so apologies for that.
I think anybody named Mike is used to it. Okay. So let me just, since we have some new members, let me just really briefly say what the sustainability scorecard is. We created we identified a few metrics that we thought would be useful to track in terms of town performance on sustainability. The last major update of this data was in around February. I've updated a couple individual things since then. But we shared this with the board and found it to be a useful, or heard the feedback it was a useful product to have. It can be updated once a year, twice a year to keep track of a few key metrics. We may revisit what metrics we choose over time, but for instance, renewable energy, by our calculation, the community as a whole is around 36%, is higher than Excel's average because of a relatively high use of solar and things like that in our community. And we have others, I won't go through all of them, but we have some energy ones, residential water use. The ozone air quality one is one I like to highlight all the time because at least as far back as the last 10 years, it exceeds the EPA standard. And so for anyone who gets the air quality alerts on the phone, you won't be surprised to hear that we are frequently, consistently in violation of this standard. We have a couple other metrics on here, waste and others. So when we presented this in February, we presented it also by saying that where we want to take this is not only to measure performance against these metrics, but to establish goals that our committee would recommend to the town board. Goals that the town board would endorse at some point in the future formally. And once the goals are in place, then we can also advocate for, recommend specific actions by the town leadership to achieve those goals. So if we said we wanted to increase this renewable electricity percentage to 100%, then we could, come up with ideas about how to do that and recommend those to the town board, so on and so forth. There are, in the back of this, there are some like tips for individuals and businesses. I think these are useful, but personally, I think that the bigger prize here would be serious programs or policies formally adopted by the town. So we've done that, and the next question in this progression is what goals to set. And so I have previously shared a, let me get my screen set up here. I previously shared this document. The new folks will not have seen it, but there is a Google Doc here. Let me I'll put the link in the chat, or maybe I'll do that after the meeting, email it to folks. We drafted a few. We've talked about them briefly in the last couple of meetings, but we haven't gotten to the point of formally voting on them for our committee to, recommend to the town board that these be the goals. Let me tell you what they are, and then let's discuss and decide if we're at the point now where we're ready to, endorse these wholeheartedly in the next 8 minutes, or if we need to continue to work on these over time. But we've listed 6 here. Air quality, the one I'm feel personally invested in this one, that our community in the entire Front Range consistently violates EPA air quality standards, and that actions we take in this town can help contribute to bringing that down. And our towns should formally have a goal of bringing this in compliance with what's considered a safe air quality standard. Climate, that we endorse or say the town seeks the same goals that the state passed last year with SB 1261, for anyone who follows state policy, that the greenhouse gas emissions be brought down by these levels to pretty significant cuts. These are the state goals. I listed an alternate here, but my recommendation would be to align with the state goals. We have one waste goal here. Lisa, I'd love your feedback before you go. But I believe this was the last recommendation that you provided: decrease community-wide recoverables remaining in trash to 15% or lower. We had listed an alternative of increasing the recycling rate over 30%. Those are the 2 options that we've listed so far. And then we've listed 3 energy goals. Town facilities, 100% renewable electricity by 2025. If anyone did watch the town board meeting on Monday, you will have seen a discussion around this. By my calculation, this is at about 40% today between the town's solar energy and the renewable components in Excel's mix. So we'd want to get that up to 100%, and then a community-wide reach 100% by a later date, like 2030. And we've added one to reduce the natural gas consumption across the community. I've left it a little bit flexible here, although I think in the last meeting we discussed 33% as a reasonable goal. Happy to talk about how to benchmark that number as well. So I know we don't have much time left, so I'd welcome any just open discussion on these goals, the whole concept, and I guess strategically whether we want to jump on this now with a vote or push the discussion further into a future meeting.
Hey, Mike, this is Mike Foster.
Hey.
I really appreciate all the work that's gone into these goals. I would absolutely appreciate some more time to dive into this.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts around how we might want to package this, maybe a little bit differently, especially around the energy goals. The way I was viewing this is maybe we think about like setting a goal as an example of a 30% per capita energy use reduction by, let's say, 2050, and within that is natural gas, it's electricity, it's all of those things that are in goals 4, 5, and 6. And you know, I really think that we should try to be bold with some of these goals, especially around solid waste. You know, I'm in a relatively new development, and I'm watching all the C&D waste going right into the landfill. And so I'm wondering if we want to really set an ambitious goal of something above 30% reduction, and maybe it's by 2050. Maybe it's like a 50% reduction by 2050, something along those lines. Certainly want to align with the state in terms of GHG reductions by 2050. But I'm wondering around water, having a goal around water, like let's say a 20% reduction in potable water use. I think with the presentation we saw from Matt earlier and some of the opportunities that we have with landscaping, you know, that might be something that we want to explore. So at the end, we've got something with air quality, climate, waste, energy, water, and maybe as a part of that water, we have a goal of increasing our use of recycled water to something like doubling the use of recycled water over the next 20 years or something.
Or maybe also trying to encourage or require builders to install gray water systems in buildings.
Exactly. And as a part of the waste diversion, we look at doing some kind of C&D ordinance where we're encouraging developers to actually recycle their C&D waste. My quick read is about 30% of Colorado landfill waste is C&D material. So that presents a huge opportunity as Superior continues to build up and build out. And Lisa, I'm sure you have a lot more information than I do on that, but I see that as some low-hanging fruit for the town.
And actually, Karen, I have a related question loosely. So obviously new elections are happening in November with regards to the trustees, and there may potentially be some changes there. Do you think it might make sense to wait? I mean, I'd ideally like us to adopt goals as soon as possible, but do you see benefit in like recommending goals before or after the election?
You know, I think it could go either way. I mean, I think it could be beneficial to have it done, you know, to the current board, but like you said when you started talking, you know, things can change, and if we get new board members, their views may be different as well. So, you know, I think it's one way or the other. We can always tweak. You can always, you know, make the recommendations now and get those on the record. And then, you know, tweak it once we see who the new board members are.
It's nice to not have a blank piece of paper in front of people. I think having something and moving the work forward is beneficial. I'd like to recommend for the waste one that you also add in that we recommend or move toward or something organics collection curbside.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way to move. It's the only way to get a big bump in recycling and diversion.
And that climate goal. I mean, with the amount of food waste going into a landfill, and methane is what, 30 times
23 times worse. Yes.
Right. So, I mean, that's a double whammy or a double benefit for the town on that level.
Yeah, that sounds good. So
I also,
and we shouldn't forget commercial. So, but anyway, yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I also support getting goal, you know, not waiting for an election to get goals in. And in reality, our process may be to come to an agreement here on the committee and then share something with the board. And then there may be a discussion, then another round. You know, we're like starting a conversation here. So, and even if we did get full buy-in on something, then at least we have something ready when a new board comes in that we're ready to bring back to new board members. So that's great. Well, certainly I'll share the link to this so everyone can see it and ponder on it and weigh in with more input as we go, and then we can pick it up next meeting. I don't think I have any much specific feedback on these things you guys have, or, you know, reactions.
Lots of good work.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Mike. So let's all take a look at it between now and the next meeting, and then hopefully next meeting we can finalize our recommendations and make an official recommendation, move this forward. That'd be great. Cool. Any other additional comments on this item? Okay. Well, thanks. We wrapped up with 1 minute, so thank you all so much. We have a lot tonight. That was great.
And Essie, if you wouldn't mind sending me the recap
Sure.
of the weekly happenings, that would be great.
Yep, I can do that.
And then John and Becky, if you just want to maybe email each other and talk through the notes and then send me your final version, that would be great.
Well, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.